Priyank asked me to do this keynote. He said, we're having this big AI summit, and we really need someone from the Valley to come speak on what's happening over there. And I said, Priyank, AI is already at the heart of India, right? You cannot spell India without an A or an I. And he didn't laugh, just like you guys, and so here I am. Here I am, delivering the keynote. I'm Vas. I have been at Accel for about 16 years now. I'm a partner on the early stage side, so I do mostly seed and Series A investments. And I would say, without hyperbole, this is the most exciting, most energized time I've ever experienced in my investing career. I've been there for the SaaS wave. I've been there for the mobile wave. And when you think about those two shifts, SaaS and mobile were very much innovations of delivery, of consumption. We took traditional application software that was hosted on-premise and we moved it into a cloud data center so that anyone could access it on any device. We miniaturized that software so that anyone could have access to it on a mobile form factor. You could actually access compute in your pocket. SaaS and mobile were really about expanding the reach of software technology. And I think the thing that gets me so excited now is AI is really a shift in computational capability. I mean, the things that we can do, the things that we can compute, the work that we can accomplish, the problems that we can solve are vastly, vastly different than any generation of software before us. We have had the incredible, incredible good fortune to experience this wave through the eyes of some incredible companies, businesses like Cursor and Gamma and Decagon and Emma, Speak, Scale AI, one of the leading data processing and infrastructure providers out there. The number of domains that founders are touching far exceeds anything that we've seen. I go to the Y Combinator demo day multiple times a year, and Y Combinator for us in the Valley is very much an index of innovation. It's the tip of the spear. It's the youngest, most ambitious technical founders. 10, 15 years ago, you heard a set of ideas that would cluster around a specific norm. It would be business intelligence software, data infrastructure, workplace applications, collaboration tools, some of the canonical categories that obviously have yielded very, very big winners. But you go to Demo Day now and you see all of the different domains that founders are taking AI. I mean, they're touching robotics, insurance, banking and financial services, pharmaceutical services, biologics. I mean, it's just incredible to think about the looming spread of technology. Software historically has been about 5 to 10% of global GDP, and I am a big believer that AI is going to help us take it that last 90%. And the other thing that amazes me, I'm sure you guys have read some of the press reports on this, but these are some of the fastest growing companies we have ever witnessed. I think about the 4-minute mile. That was a feat of, that was an incredible physical accomplishment that humanity finally achieved, I think it was in the 80s or 90s, when someone finally ran the 4-minute mile. And thereafter, many people were able to accomplish the 4-minute mile. Thousands of people have been able to do it now. And in some ways, in our business, we have just run the 4-minute mile. It used to take 5 to 7 years to reach $100 million of ARR. But now companies are routinely getting there in 5 to 7 months. I mean, it's literally taking less than a year to reach enormous levels of scale and success. And why is that? What can we understand about some of the fastest growing AI companies in the Valley right now? I think first and foremost, the timing is right. As we talked about the SaaS and mobile wave, these markets have been conditioned for almost 15 years to source software, buy software, procure software, implement software. So we're just at a very mature time in the market right now where everyone is looking for new pieces of technology. At the same time, model costs are coming down. The dollar per token, or the cost of inference, has been falling precipitously. For the past decade, we as investors would keep a sharp eye on our AWS or our GCP costs, because the cost of compute and storage and networking were so significant for these businesses. So you look at that cost curve of compute, and you map that relative to the cost of inference, and the curve is so steep. It's getting so cost-effective now to use these models, and so that's broadening access of these APIs to a broader set of global entrepreneurs. Many of the companies that we've invested in have incredibly quick time to value. I think this is probably one of the most important dynamics of this generation of AI company. If you think about prior SaaS businesses, you think of a system of record like a CRM. You only got value out of that CRM once you'd uploaded all of your data into it, right? There was a setup and an installation time to actually getting to a point where you could extract value from that application. You think about collaboration tools businesses like a Monday.com or an Asana. It required everyone in your organization to finally adopt the product and actually collaborate with one another till you got to experience the network effect. That was the power of those applications. But AI today, these companies are delivering value out of the box. You don't need to wait to upload a bunch of data. You don't need to wait for all of your coworkers to hop on these systems. I mean, the single-player utility is almost immediate. And I would say all of these companies are ruthlessly focused on continuing to shave down complexity. How do we take clicks, screens, buttons out of the process so that we can get our end users to their intended outcome as quickly as possible? I'll touch briefly on two of the fastest growing companies in the Accel portfolio that I think hopefully can be archetypes or models for things that we are to do to build here in the States. So I led the seed in the Series A in a company called Gamma. I don't know if anyone has used Gamma. It's a presentation tool. Any hands? Okay. Paying subscribers? All of you paying subscribers? Yes? Okay, good. Gamma looked at the presentation software landscape and they said, it takes so much time and effort to go from idea to well-structured presentation, to build something beautiful, to take a thought and to be able to express that in a very powerful way. So how do we take all of that work and tuck that complexity behind a prompt? You look at a company like Cursor, which, as much as they're a developer tools business, I would actually call them a design firm. That team spends all of their time thinking about shaving down every little pixel in that experience so that the concept of being able to tab accept on a code edit is just so ergonomic and so delightful. Both of these companies, I think, really underscore what this next generation of AI company needs to focus on, which is incredible usability, a delightful experience, products that really touch an emotional need, and businesses that are really building an incredible brand around their product. 2 months ago, Gamma actually just launched its rebrand as a business, and we're just a Series A company. So we're sitting around the board and talking about this pending rebrand, and one of our other investors had to ask the question. He said, well, Grant, why are we doing this big rebrand? We're just, we're such a young business. Most companies do these large launches much later in their maturity curve. And the founder said something really powerful. They said, look, we can't just be another presentation software company. The supply side of software is commoditizing so quickly. We have to stand for something that's very unique. We need to build a brand that our end users are really motivated by. That, I think, is going to be a big challenge for entrepreneurs, especially in this room. It's, as Priyank was mentioning, there's so much great technical talent in India. But increasingly, I'm seeing the best founders in the Valley are able to blend that technical expertise with an almost liberal arts understanding of story, of narrative, of brand, of UI, of UX. And to be able to package that together, that is what is leading to outsized success. I'd say lastly, both of these companies spend a lot of time thinking about their data interaction patterns. They have built in, fundamentally into their product, an implied notion of reinforcement learning. So anytime you tab accept inside of Cursor, anytime you accept and edit inside of Gamma, that is information that those companies are using to create a better experience going forward. Interaction data for historic SaaS companies, we always promised, there was always the promise of being able to use it to improve the service over time, and some companies definitely took advantage of it, but now the best companies are absolutely using that interaction data to figure out how to fine-tune models, how to deliver the right outcomes the next time those users come in. And so AI companies that are going to be breaking out need to think about how their end users are helping to inform their model efficacy. I am also here today not just because I'm a partner at Accel, but because I really deeply believe that there are going to be many billion-dollar businesses built globally. Again, if you think about AI touching the other 90% of global GDP, that is an enormous, enormous market of revenue for companies to be able to go out and harvest. I think to build those billion-dollar revenue businesses, one can certainly fight the wars of the Gammas and the Cursors, the very bottoms-up, organic, PLG-type businesses. But I would also encourage founders in this room to really lean into the unique advantages that India has to offer. Firstly, India comes from this great origin of service, of delivering solutions. I think about the Tatas and the Wipros and the Cognizants and the Infosys of the world. These are businesses whose DNA are about going into companies, understanding business logic, understanding workflow, and encoding that workflow into software. That is incredibly, incredibly valuable DNA to have. Many of the fastest growing companies in the Valley right now that are touching some of these vertical domains, things like financial services or legal tech or healthcare, they're very young, ambitious founders, but they don't have the depth of domain expertise that I think exists inside of India. And so, founders in this room, entrepreneurs, we really need to take advantage of that. Having a human in the loop default to the company that you're designing. I had a CIO once tell me, he said, Vas, all the AI companies you keep sending me, they sound really interesting, but they all start their pitch by saying, hey, we're going to eliminate all these jobs. We're going to reduce labor inside of your organization. We're going to help you save costs. And the CIO had a very interesting point. He said, Vas, at the end of the day, all of the knowledge for how our company works is trapped inside of our team's mind. So we can't just replace those employees out of the gate. We need to find a way to embrace them and extend them. We need to give them tools that allow them to do more things to improve their throughput. So having a unique understanding, again, I think this comes back to the DNA that's very unique to India. It's about embracing the people part of the equation as much as it is about building technology. So how do we get there? I think, first and foremost, we're starting here by having a conversation in this room. Building $1 billion revenue business, I think, implies you have to be a global company from the get-go. This is a small commercial for Accel, quite frankly. You need to be with a global firm, someone who actually understands what it means to take an invention, a technology, and help you get installed worldwide to a global Fortune 5000 customer base. Obviously, we've talked about the focus on brand, the focus on UI and UX. These are critical day zero primitives as much as building great technology is. Understanding inference costs. Again, the dominant cost of goods inside of most of these software companies is the dollars you'll be spending on Anthropic and OpenAI. But increasingly, many of the best companies are finding ways to mediate the prompts that are coming in from their end users and figuring out how to source, open source models that can solve certain problems while reserving some of the thorniest problems for the more expensive proprietary models. So being very dynamic, being very light on your feet as it relates to your infrastructure. And then, of course, let's build great companies. Let's not build companies that are exclusively venture funded. Let's build companies that are funded by our customers. The one very interesting nuance in San Francisco right now is the metric that is being lionized among the best founders is ARR per employee. Everyone wants to get to this new magic number of $1 million of revenue per employee. We never talked about that over the last decade. For the last decade, it was all about how much could you fundraise and what was your last valuation. But now it's about how efficient can you build your business? Can you build an AI product, and can you actually build a company with AI now? Obviously, hopefully you figure this out after Accel has invested, but over time, I would anticipate more and more of the companies that are going to be built are going to be predominantly founder-owned, predominantly employee-owned, and that's a very, very good thing. So I will end by saying I see so much magic in the Valley, but I am so motivated and so excited by the opportunity that is here in India. And I have full faith that a substantial plurality of the billion-dollar revenue businesses that are going to be built around this wave, I think is going to come from this country. And we're so excited to be part of it, to help out with that, and to cheer those successes on. So with that, thank you so much.